What is pretty in pink and gives Putin nightmares? Ukraine's new missile, which is set to change the game not only in Ukraine but in all of Europe. Ukraine has just done something that not even the strongest European powers could do, and that means Russia has a serious problem. The ballistic missile strategy that the Kremlin had devised for Ukraine lies in tatters. Something pink and powerful is coming for Russia's most lethal missiles, and it's making Putin tear what's left of his hair. It took just 30 seconds for Ukraine to showcase the last thing that Russia wanted to see. As the camera pans around, we see it for the first time: the FP7X. Affixed to its launcher, the brilliant pink missile is in firing position, pointed toward the sky and ready to fly, which is a monument to the ingenuity of Ukraine and Firepoint, which is the company behind so many of Ukraine's most important drones. It was Firepoint that developed the Flamingo, another pink weapon that is hitting Russia as we speak. The Flamingo is a cruise missile drone hybrid capable of delivering 1,150 kilograms of explosive fury at about 3,000 kilometers. But the FP7X is different. This isn't a missile designed to hurt Russia, it was made to defend Ukraine and all of Europe. As the camera pans out, we see the final preparations for launch. An instruction is given and the engines fire. A massive plume of smoke forms under the pink missile as it flies directly up, leaving a trail of flames in its wake. The footage switches to different angles. The missile continues its ascent and then streaks into the sky. No target is hit, but that wasn't the point. This was Firepoint's victory lap, the small clip that showcases what is coming for Russia. Finally, after years of relying on Western help, Ukraine has built a ballistic missile interceptor that it believes will finally be the turning point in the aerial battle. Russia's last real weapon advantage over Ukraine is being mitigated. The one weapon that Ukraine needs more than any other has arrived, and it didn't come courtesy of the US or any of Ukraine's European partners. Ukraine built this weapon itself, and it's changed the entire complexion of European air defense as we know it. Something has changed forever. And you'll understand why as we dig into what this new missile is and what it represents. To the casual Ukraine war observer, the pink missile that Firepoint just demonstrated represents what appears to be the second known launch of Ukraine's FP7 ballistic missile. That launch was accompanied by the FP7's first fully guided flight, and it's a milestone for Ukraine. Even if we take air defense out of the equation for a moment, the FP7 delivers homegrown ballistic missile capabilities to Ukraine. That already hurts Putin. Russia was supposed to be the only country that had a real ballistic missile threat. Whatever Ukraine could do would come courtesy of its Western partners, which meant that Russia would always be able to stand ahead when it comes to stockpiles. But with the FP7, Ukraine has changed everything. With a range of up to 200 kilometers and a maximum speed of Mach 4.3, the FP7 is lethal. It can carry a warhead weighing 150 kilograms, and the missile has a maximum flight duration of 250 seconds, Militani revealed in a September 2025 assessment. On its own, the FP7 is a revolution for Ukraine. But what we see in the footage isn't just Firepoint's announcement that it's entered the ballistic missile arena. What we saw is the FP7, but not as we know it. The missile in Firepoint's video was the FP7X, not the original FP7. That matters because it means two things. First, Firepoint is already at the point where it's tweaking its original FP7 design so that the missile can be used for purposes other than striking Russia. Second, and linked to this fact, the FP7X is expected to form the basis of a Europe-encompassing air defense platform that is unlike anything that the continent or Putin has seen before. This wasn't just a missile test. This was the early days of FREYJA in action. United 24 Media reports that the footage Firepoint shared demonstrates how Firepoint's pink missile can adjust the path of its flight after launch, which is a critical ability for a missile to have if it's going to be used for air defense. The same outlet notes that Firepoint likely carried out several other test maneuvers that it didn't showcase in the video. That makes sense. The footage of the FP7X was a teaser for what's to come, not a piece of intelligence that Russia could use to figure out how Ukraine made the missile. Send the warning. Don't reveal the secrets. This is a perfect strategy for Ukraine as it looks to send uncontrollable shivers up Putin's spine. Russia's leader would prefer for a very different 30 seconds to be delivering those shivers, and the fear he'll feel when seeing the FP7X in action is compounded by the knowledge of why Ukraine has developed its latest weapon. The pink missile wouldn't exist were it not for Putin's invasion, and neither would the FREYJA program for which it will serve a vital role. The FP7X isn't a standalone missile, it's part of a much larger whole that encompasses much of Europe. The co-founder of Firepoint, Dennis Stieleman, revealed back in May when he said that Ukraine's new Pink missile will form the basis of a pan-European air defense system that delivers to Europe something that the continent would never otherwise have had without help from the US. And this isn't Ukraine working alone. Partnerships all over Europe have made the FP7X possible. The infrared semi-homing head loaded into the front of the missile is being developed by Firepoint and the German air defense manufacturer Diehl Defense. For its long-range detection radar, either the Saab Giraffe 8A4A, Hensoldt TRM-L4D or the Thales Groundmaster 400 will be used. None of these is made in Ukraine. All are available in Europe. And that's the point. Ukraine's Pink missile is a solution to the very real ballistic threat that Russia poses to all of Europe. It's a sign that Putin's efforts to divide, to split Ukraine's allies and minimize the aid that Ukraine receives have failed. And most importantly, the FP7X represents Ukraine's evolution from being a recipient of military hardware and into a genuine partner to European allies that relies heavily on tech developed in Ukraine in 2026, as Ukraine relied on Western tech when Putin first launched his invasion. Putin's goal was to subjugate, but all he did was create a military monster that Russia can't contain. In its analysis of FREYJA and the Pink missile that serves as the program's foundation, Global Defense Corps reveals that one of the core principles behind the program is the reduction of the cost involved in tackling Russia's ballistic missile threat. The Kyiv Post highlights the same point, as it notes that the FP7X is expected to cost substantially less than $1 million for each missile. With European funding and a series of partners that want to buy as many of these missiles as possible, Firepoint could hold the key to creating the sky shield that Europe desperately needs against Russia. Ukraine may also have a replacement for Patriot missile interceptors, which cost over $4 million each. Lethal enough to take out ballistic missiles at a quarter of the cost of the Patriot sounds like a good deal for Ukraine and its partners already. And as strange as it sounds, even the choice of pink for the missile has a practical purpose. Firepoint hasn't chosen that color to humiliate Putin or because it's a trademark of the company after the development of the Flamingo. Pink is the pick because that color makes the missile easier to track and will also help recovery teams locate debris after impact, ensuring that Ukraine can clear up before Russia has a chance to get its hands on the remains of Firepoint's new air defense missiles. Now, all of this is very exciting for Ukraine and Europe as a whole, but there is a caveat to Firepoint's FP7X demonstration that needs to be mentioned. If Firepoint and Ukraine are to truly have a Russian ballistic missile killer on their hands, there are a few things that we need to see from the FP7X. The type of maneuverability needed to track and strike ballistic missiles is one of them. These types of missiles aren't like drones or cruise missiles. It isn't good enough for an interceptor missile to explode nearby. Hit-to-kill capabilities are a must. And for the FP7X to be a real threat to Russia's ballistic stockpile, it needs to be maneuverable enough to score direct hits against fast-moving missiles. It looks like Firepoint's Pink missile has the requisite speed. If that can be paired with proper course correction capabilities, then Ukraine is in business. Assuming that the FP7X can move as well as it needs to move, the literal rise of the FP7X is massive, both in the context of the Ukraine war and Europe's defense against Russia. Why? Before we answer that question, this is a quick reminder that you're watching The Military Show. If this is the kind of insight that you want to see, then make sure that you are subscribed to the channel so you never miss a video. Now let's start with Ukraine. Putin has created a severe ballistic missile problem for Ukraine that needs to be solved sooner rather than later. As CNN reported on June 4th, Russia has been ramping up its aerial strikes against Ukraine for a while now. It has had to, with Russia's ground campaign in 2026 being nothing short of disastrous. The only way for Putin to support his claim that the fall of Ukraine is inevitable is to ramp up Russia's aerial campaign. Russia is now at the point where it's launching around 8,000 Shahid-type drones at Ukraine monthly. However, it's ballistic missiles that represent the much bigger problem for Ukraine, and we can see that in the numbers. For instance, according to CNN, a Russian airstrike against Ukraine on June 2nd involved 41 ballistic missiles. That's more missiles than Russia launched at Ukraine in all of May, and 30 of the 41 managed to touch down on Ukrainian territory. Ballistic missile interceptions are nowhere near the rate that Ukraine needs them to be. Ukraine's Ministry of Defense also highlighted the problem when reporting on the performance of its air defenses in May. Drones were mostly dealt with. Ukraine achieved an interception rate of 91.73% for Russia's strike drones, amounting to 7,476 intercepts of 8,150 drones that Russia fired. Cruise and ballistic missile interceptions were much lower. Of 211 Russian missiles launched, Ukraine intercepted 112, for a rate of just over 53%. Gaps are forming in Ukraine's air defenses. Russia can sense them, and it's trying to take advantage. According to Ukrainian military intelligence, Russia is now able to launch around 100 ballistic missiles per month, while maintaining its existing stockpiles at a stable level. That's a major concern for Ukraine. With an approximate 50% interception rate, that means dozens of ballistic missiles could touch down on Ukrainian territory every month. The reason for this low interception rate comes down to a challenge that Ukraine has faced ever since Putin launched his invasion. Patriot missile stockpiles are never where Ukraine needs them to be. In a June 2nd piece for The Guardian, Peter Beaumont revealed that there is now a window of vulnerability that has been created in Europe as a result of Operation Epic Fury in Iran. About a third of the stockpiles of these interceptor missiles, amounting to an estimated 1,100 missiles, have already been burned through. Ukraine feels this problem more acutely than most. Not only are Patriot missiles extremely expensive, but they are now in short supply. Ukraine relies on the US and its Western partners to deliver these much-needed missiles to deal with Russia's ballistic threat. But when those missiles are being used elsewhere, Ukraine can't get them. The US won't give up any from its stockpiles when it's still using them. There's also a knock-on effect for European countries, which now hesitate to provide more Patriot missiles to Ukraine because they don't know if and when they'll be able to replenish their stockpiles. Operation Epic Fury sent a shockwave through Europe's air defenses. The FP7X is being positioned as the solution to a clear dependence on US missile interceptors that worries Europe and actively hurts Ukraine. If Ukraine were to just maintain the status quo, as Putin no doubt wants the country to do, then this ballistic missile problem would never be solved. That's according to Ukrainian Air Force Command spokesperson Yuri Ignat, who said on June 2nd that limited global production of air defense missiles will mean that Ukraine will face a shortage of what it needs for as long as the war rages. At least, it will if Ukraine doesn't do something about it. The FP7X is Ukraine doing something about it. Operation Epic Fury sent a shockwave through Europe's air defenses. However, behind Ukraine's immediate need for more air defense assets lies an even bigger issue. Europe is pretty much as reliant on the US for its air defenses as Ukraine, which is why FREYJA exists in the first place. Europe is looking to decouple from the US on the air defense front, which makes Ukraine's development of the FP7X as much about building a sky shield for all of Europe as it is about serving Ukraine's needs to tackle Russia's ballistic missile assaults. Let's look toward a hypothetical future. Somehow, Russia is finally able to defeat Ukraine. With his mission accomplished, Putin turns his attention toward the rest of Europe, especially the European NATO members that he claims cause Russia so many problems. That's a massive problem for Europe because it relies on the US. As Euromaidan Press points out, Europe as a continent doesn't make missile defenses at scale. Moves are being made to change that fact. On May 12th, 13 European countries, including Ukraine, launched an anti-ballistic coalition under which the collaborative creation of the FP7X and its supporting systems fall. But right now there's too much reliance on US hardware in Europe, which opens up that window of vulnerability that Beaumont talked about. The US-made interceptor missiles that Europe needs to defend itself aren't coming anymore. According to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, rebuilding its missile stockpiles in all areas is going to be a multi-year project for the US, to the point where it won't be until the midpoint of 2029 that the US will be back to its pre-Operation Epic Fury levels of Patriot interceptors. And that assumes that Operation Epic Fury doesn't reignite. No peace agreement has been reached between the US and Iran, and the ceasefire between the two nations still rests on a knife edge. A rekindling of hostilities will burn through more Patriot missiles, which puts a US-dependent European air defense strategy in an even worse position. Europe needs the FP7X as much as Ukraine. Without it and the FREYJA program, Russia's ballistic missiles could be the key to everything that Putin wants to achieve in Ukraine and Europe. Now, Ukraine has a solution that Europe couldn't deliver to itself, and the best thing about the FP7X is that it may enter production much sooner than anybody could have anticipated. In a June 4th report, Interfax says that Stielerman has hinted that Ukraine's new Pink missile is close to entering production. I expect that this summer, or at the latest in the early fall, we'll begin test flights to Moscow. And since we never wait for approval and codification, but build production lines immediately, we never make 1, 2, or 3 copies of anything there. We immediately produce 10 test copies. We'll make 10 to 20 missiles there and start producing them. Then once we've been codified, once they buy us, dozens will be produced there, Firepoint's co-founder declares. Stielerman is talking about the FP7 there, but the FP7X is based on that ballistic missile, which means that we may be looking at Ukraine's air defense game changer entering production before the end of 2026. For Europe, this can't come soon enough. Russia has been ramping up its ballistic rhetoric, which makes the need for a counter more urgent than ever. In May, Putin was lauding the test firing of a new intercontinental ballistic missile named the Sarmat. Russia's leader calls the Sarmat the most powerful missile in the world, and he says that it will enter combat service by the end of 2026. At the same time, Russia is openly threatening the Baltic states, and Putin has signed a new law that permits him to invade any country if he's doing it to protect Russian citizens abroad. Between May 19th and 21st, Russia also held a shock exercise to test its strategic nuclear capabilities, which followed the test launch of a nuclear-capable missile on May 12th. These are all very purposeful signals that Putin is sending to Europe. Russia is laying the groundwork for a new war, and ballistic missiles will play a huge role in that conflict. The emergence of the FP7X has thrown a wrench into Putin's plans. Ukraine's Pink missile is almost fully domestically produced, and the components that Ukraine can't make itself come from nations that have as vested an interest in protecting themselves against Russia as Ukraine has. US dependence is being taken out of the equation, and the Russian plan for Ukraine and Europe is being countered. For Putin, this is more than the announcement of a new Ukrainian weapon. Firepoint's Pink missile signals a wholesale change in Europe and Ukraine's air defense posture, and it's a change that could make Russia's ballistic missile threat a non-factor. But while the FP7X is still in the testing phase, another new Ukrainian weapon is ruining Russia's rear. The Morrigan is a reality, and it's the secret weapon that Ukraine has been using to penetrate deep into the occupied territories to shatter Russian logistics in Crimea. What is the Morrigan, and why is it so important? Discover the answers to those questions in our video. And if you enjoyed this video, hit the subscribe button so you can keep track of all the latest Ukrainian weapon developments. And thank you for watching.